Hello and welcome back to Fanboy Talks. Of course, my name is Von Hyde and this is a channel all about what fanboys and fangirls might care about. Mostly games. I don't know why I keep saying that. It's generally games, unless you're talking about the You Guys May Be Ink podcast that posts every Monday, each and every Monday. That is just about whatever the fuck we really want. We did an Avengers Infinity War episode this Monday, so check that one out. But today, the big game that I want to talk about, and it's super late, obviously, because I know anybody who's actually watching this is like, hey, everybody else did God of War reviews. And I'm like, yeah, of course they did. But now I want to do mine because I like making content that nobody's going to click on because they've already checked out everyone else's review. I will also include a small story and a little snippet of how Fanboy Talks is really going to be at the end of this, which is focusing on one story and kind of, I don't want to say a deep dive, but giving my opinions on it. So you guys will see what's happening. I guess it's 1 to 2 stories. It's really just about Cory Barlog. He's the creative director of God of War. But holy shit. I have to tell you guys, God of War is a great game. I was never a fan of Kratos before. I didn't think he was interesting. He was just a hulking rage ape. He was pretty ridiculous. But now he's really, really interesting. He actually has depth, which I never would have guessed. The relationship between Kratos and Atreus gets really, really interesting. And obviously, this is going to be kind of spoiler full because the game has been out for a couple weeks now. I mean, I'll try to keep it as vague as possible. I will definitely let you know when I'm really going to get into spoilers. So right now, let's just do no spoilers. The relationship between Kratos and Atreus is fucking great, and I'm sorry if I'm saying Kratos wrong or whatever you guys want to get at me for it. Put it in the comments down below, kind of a thing. Like the video if you hate that I say Kratos or whatever. But I love the relationship between them. The father and son dynamic is really, really awesome. It definitely set me on a weird path, and I loved the ending. Damn it, I forgot. I'm not supposed to get into spoilers right now. Whatever. Let's just get right into spoilers. Who cares? Because the game has been out for like 2 weeks. So, one of the best scenes in this entire game is when Kratos, he finally tells a good story based on what Atreus thinks. And he tells Atreus how he got the name Atreus. And it is from a Spartan that Kratos knew when he was originally training, or when he was originally he's always been a Spartan, but when he was a soldier in Sparta. And it's such a great story. He talks about essentially his friend being like a light shining in the universe versus everyone else in the Spartan army being really dark and just about killing people. He was always smiling and being awesome. And I was like, wow, that is some crazy emotion that I never would have thought to see from Kratos. And I know several other reviews might have already talked about that moment, but it's so good. It's so fantastic. I definitely didn't know how to react to it, and especially afterwards when Atreus is like, wow, you finally told a good story for once, because basically it's like a consistent thread through the entire game that Kratos doesn't know how to tell a good story, because he basically just tells these fucked up ones like the tortoise and the hare and all sorts of weird shit. Really just messed up ones like a man and a horse, and he ends up like trapping the horse, and it's like, never get your expectations too high and never trust anybody. So it's a little odd. He definitely instills some interesting things in his son. I love the dynamic between the two, especially when Atreus finds out that he is a god and he becomes kind of an asshole, which is so interesting, and then he's kind of set straight by the things that happen in Helheim, which is so interesting. He sees the fucked up shit that he did, and he was like, wow, you know what, I actually, like, he develops as a character, and you get to see that, and it's so awesome. It doesn't happen in like a cutscene or anything. It actually happens. You get to interact with it, and it's so cool. But there's so many great things about this game. I love the alternative takes on Norse mythology. I've never been a huge like Norse mythology kind of a guy. As far as I know with Norse mythology is some little tips that friends have told me, or basically the shit from the Thor movies, like everybody else, where they're essentially fucking aliens, but the Nords, like the fucking Vikings, didn't know that they were essentially like just aliens. They thought of them as gods, so they idolized them. But I love the alternate take on it, because it's not like, oh yeah, Thor and Odin, like good guys or whatever, and the giants are bad guys. It's actually that Thor's a fucking asshole. He's like a killmonger. He's bloodthirsty, and Odin is like this psychotic like ruler of men and gods. And the whole like war between the two god races essentially is super interesting. I loved all the characters. I love that there's only a few characters, so it's a very small story and a lot of characters that you can really grow to love. Like Sindri and Brock, they're really awesome. They're the two little the blacksmiths you go and talk to, and you really get to develop their stories versus like finding a million characters and then choosing the one you love. It's like, no, I love all these characters because they took the time to really flesh out all of them, and that is so awesome. And it's just so fantastic that they really did that. Another thing that I loved about this game was its subtle take to storytelling, where it doesn't actually like storytelling and actually answers to questions. It doesn't tell you like directly. It just randomly says shit like in the background. Like you didn't know that the Leviathan axe was essentially given to Kratos. He just starts the game with the Leviathan axe and you're like, what the fuck? And then later it turns out that his wife gave it to him. He essentially inherited it. And it's just all sorts of stuff that you never would have known unless you just listened. And that's really awesome because just straight up exposition, just right in your face exposition can get really tiresome, but this finally gives you like a second to breathe. And if you didn't see it, you just don't. You don't know what it's talking about. A little burp. So I think that's just a really like refreshing take on storytelling and exposition, because it just doesn't happen in other video games. Whenever the story is meant to be pushed forward, there's a big like climax, a big moment where that happens. And in this game, that doesn't happen. It subtly does it. It slowly nudges you to go do something else, which is so awesome. I really, really love that. It's not jarring. I don't have like fucking story whiplash or something. And this is also something that most people have hit on in their reviews, is that the combat never gets old. The Leviathan axe is so interesting and there's so many awesome combos that you can do, and I love the fact that they allow you to change your controls and map out what button goes where. I kept it with the standard buttons with the exception of the the interaction button. I switched it to X instead of circle, and my roll is on circle. It just makes more sense. It's like the Dark Souls combat essentially. That's basically how I had my fucking controls laid out, was Dark Souls, which is so odd. The combat gives you so many varying ways to do things, and I just love that. It's so awesome, and the combat itself and all the RPG elements actually add to the lore. Because I watched the Kind of Funny Games cast, the spoiler cast with Corey Barlog, where he talks about the big spoiler at the end is that Atreus is Loki, which is so interesting, but also, I don't know, some people are like, oh, they're really like, they're taking liberties with the Norse mythology, which I'm glad they're doing, and they're not just making it like a bland like cookie cutter kind of Norse mythology story. I don't know many people who've done that, because I don't know a whole lot of Norse mythology. I'm glad that they kind of did that. You go through the entire game, he's being called Atreus, and then he's finally called Loki at the end. It's so weird. But Corey Barlog talks about how there's subtle like hints toward him being Loki throughout the game, and also Loki is very attuned with animals, and the whole like Atreus can actually use like summoning magic essentially, which leads into the combat and the RPG elements. So everything in this game comes back to the story and the great storytelling and the really subtle storytelling, which is so awesome. And I never would have expected that from this. It's essentially like, oh, if you didn't look into it, you never would have noticed it. So again, a comparison to Dark Souls with the combat, but also with the subtlety when it comes to storytelling. Whereas it's like, yeah, you could get a decent amount of story, but if you really look for it, you can get a lot more story. If you check that lore tab, if you get new items and all sorts of stuff, you get so much more story. And that's so awesome, because it really rewards people like me who really want that story. There's two things that I could say that I wasn't a huge fan about in this game, and one would be a very small amount of enemy variation. Pretty much every enemy is the same as the last. Like the nightmares, they do slightly different things. The reavers, they do slightly different things. Each one is just a small tweak of the others. Like the trolls that you fight, the big departure I would say is like the wolvers. Like that was really weird. You just randomly get these fucking wolvers that are like Balverines from the Fable series, but they like have a berserk mode, which is really cool. There's just very small amount of enemy variety, and it's one, enjoyable, but also can get really tiring. It's enjoyable because it's like, oh, I know how to fight these, and you grow and you learn how to fight them, and you better use your time and your skills, which is really awesome. But also it gets kind of, I can't say it gets boring actually, because it doesn't. Like, fighting them is really awesome. It's just like, oh yeah, I know how to kill this guy, I'm gonna take out his legs and then I'm gonna go kill him. Any enemy with shields, you just take out his legs and then it's way easier to kill him. You can do some cool combos on him. And the second thing that I was a little bit let down on was the ending. I don't think it was necessarily like anticlimactic. I actually thought it was really awesome. It has like a great cliffhanger, which I really enjoyed, where it was like that last panel that Atreus didn't see. The big like panels on the wall in Jotunheim. So I'm really excited for the second game. It's definitely a cliffhanger, and I don't know. I would have thought that spreading the ashes would have been a little bit different. I don't know. It was really not like an anticlimactic ending or anything. It just had kind of a cliffhanger. I wasn't let down by it at all. And make sure, I'm telling you right now, once you finish the story, just go back to the house and sleep. It is a little cutscene. I'm not going to tell you what happens. It's fucking awesome. Like, it's great. And that's when you truly roll credits, and it's sweet. Make sure you go back to the house and sleep. It's fantastic. And it really, like, that's what I would say is the ending that really makes up for me being slightly let down, but really I shouldn't have been let down by the actual like ending. The resolution of the story that they were telling was this cutscene, because it's so sweet. It just gives you a little taste of the second game, and that's awesome. Another thing that I loved about this game was the amazing aesthetic of the world. Everything is really bright and colorful, and that's awesome. I definitely would have imagined it to be much more dark and dreary, like the other God of War games are really like foggy and hazy, just kind of stuff that you would see in the other God of War games. But in this game, it's actually really bright and it's colorful and it's awesome. And I just wasn't expecting it. It's really, really sweet, especially like the stuff that you can do with the Leviathan axe and the Blades of Chaos. A lot of the combos and a lot of the runes that you get, they have these really awesome motions that you do, and everything is so bright and colorful, and the animation of it is so awesome. I really, really enjoy basically everything about this game, with the two issues that I have. Fast travel of all things in this game is so much better than every other game. It's not just like, oh, you port there. It's actually you go across the world tree, which is really sweet. And they don't even give you actually, like, they don't give you the ability to fast travel wherever you want until a very late game. So you're actually forced to experience the world, which is so cool, and it's such an interesting way to make people experience your world, because it doesn't feel limiting. It feels like once you actually get the rest of it, you're like, whoa, what the fuck? Now I can go anywhere. But now you actually have the time to go anywhere, because you're basically at the end of the fucking game. You're just gearing up for the big boss fights or fighting the Valkyries, essentially. So it totally makes sense for them to do that. Another thing that I loved was the boat. The boat was such an amazing storytelling device. You basically just go, like, after a little bit, they just Mimir would tell stories, which, oh my god, is Mimir an awesome character. He's so fucking weird and interesting and funny. I loved his character. I wish I would have bought the Stonemason edition so I could get that fucking Mimir keychain, the talking one. That'd be so cool. And fucking, in retrospect, I hate my life. For the most part, I basically covered everything that I loved about this game. It's such a fantastic game, and you definitely need to play it. You don't need to know the other stuff about the God of War series, but I mean, I would imagine it would augment the experience, so you could go back and play 1, 2, 3, Chains of Olympus, Ghost of Sparta. You could do all of that. You could play the other games, or you could just watch like a fucking 5-minute video about it. IGN had one, and they still have one. So I want to get into the second part of this video, which is more of the actual like template of what Fanboy Talks is going to be, and it's like a dive on a topic. Not a really deep dive. I mean, it's just going to be a topic that I give my opinions on. So Cory Barlog, the creative director of this game, did an interview with basically a journalist over at Kotaku. And if you guys have seen anything about it, it's kind of interesting the way the journalists are interpreting this interview, because this is how it went down. Jason Schreier, a really good games journalist, does these awesome think pieces. He was basically interviewing Cory Barlog and was like, so I'm going to act this out for you guys. So here's Jason. So how much of future plans do you have mapped out in your head? And Cory says, 5 games. So that's just in his head what he thinks is going to happen. Like, oh yeah, he's got it roughly mapped out 5 games. I'm a writer of sorts, so I have roughly like a fucking million stories written out in my head, but actually making them into something is different. And this is how IGN and other games journalists interpreted that. God of War director says he has 5 games planned for the series. God of War Studios has 5 more games plotted out. God of War director has 5 more games planned. All that kind of stuff. It's just ridiculous. Like, oh, he said in his head that he has roughly like 5 games planned out in his head, and immediately that means, oh, he's confirming 5 more games are coming in the God of War series. Wow. That is just outrageous. That is a huge leap in logic. I don't understand how anybody can read that much into something. You have to dig deep to get that much from that. That's probably why a lot of people thought that fucking Days Gone was coming in 2018 without the actual like 2018 stamped on that fucking initial trailer at E3. It's like crazy. Just one small thing is said and then so many people take it, just blow it out of proportion, and now all of these God of War fans are going to be like, sweet, 5 more fucking games. They're not going to know the initial context of that interview was just him saying, oh, I've got 5 games mapped out in my head. Just a quick thought, 5 games. This is what could happen in the series, 5 games. And it's like, dude, this does not mean that there's fucking 5 games fully mapped out, start to finish. All these characters, oh, this is how fucking Brock and Sindri interact in the 3rd game or whatever. It's like, no. He says he's got roughly 5 games planned out in his head. He's got fucking daydreams for 5 games. Like, that's what he has essentially, and everybody's reading into it crazy. It's just ridiculous. This is a way for me to warn people to just kind of check your expectations and really make sure you're reading into things, or I guess that you're not reading into things. Like when you see an article titled, oh, God of War director confirms 5 games, you really like check, oh, that interview with Jason Schreier, what did he actually say, kind of a thing, instead of just fucking taking IGN or a Game Informer or fucking whoever at their word. VG 24/7. I've literally never checked them. But that's about it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like it, click the like button down below. Click the dislike button if you hated it. But make sure you leave a comment. Let me know. Constructive criticism is always awesome. And I totally just said that word wrong. Yeah, that's it for me today. Make sure you guys watch out for other videos. Got another one coming on Friday. And check out You Guys Made Me Inc. I'm proud of the podcast. I think it's cool. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. And I hope you have a great day.